The royal guard didn't wait for approval. Kate's name was enough best emotional story. Staff members moved carefully, speaking in low voices, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Something felt different in the air, tense, uncertain, and heavy. Near one of the main entrances stood a royal guard. He had served for many years, long enough to understand that silence inside royal walls often meant trouble. He was trained to observe, to listen, and most importantly, to wait for approval before taking action. Rules were clear. Orders came from above. No matter how urgent a situation felt, a guard was expected to follow protocol. That morning, however, protocol felt fragile. A sudden movement caught his attention. A junior staff member hurried down the corridor, her face pale, her steps rushed. She stopped near a group of officials, whispering urgently. The guard could not hear every word, but he could sense the fear in her voice. The officials looked at one another, unsure, debating what to do next. No one seemed ready to make a decision. The guard tightened his grip on his position. He had seen this before, moments when hesitation caused small problems to grow into serious ones. Still, he waited. That was his duty. Then he heard it. One word, a name. Kate. It was spoken softly, almost accidentally, but it reached him clearly. The sound of that name cut through the noise in his mind like a sharp signal. His posture changed instantly. His eyes sharpened and his calm expression turned firm. For a brief second, memories flashed through his thoughts. He remembered seeing her walk through these same halls, greeting staff with a simple smile, asking how their families were, remembering names that others forgot. He remembered moments of pressure when tension filled the palace, and she remained steady, never raising her voice, never treating anyone as invisible. To him, she was not just a royal figure. She was someone who brought calm where chaos could easily grow. The officials continued talking, discussing phone calls, approvals, and procedures. They spoke of waiting, of confirming details, of not overreacting. Each second felt longer than the last. The guard knew something was wrong. He did not know every detail, but his instincts were strong. Years of service had taught him that sometimes danger does not announce itself loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, hidden behind delays and polite discussions. He took a step forward. One of the officials noticed him and raised a hand slightly, signaling him to stay back. "Wait," the official said, his voice controlled but uncertain. "We need clearance." The guard paused just for a moment. His training told him to stop. His heart told him not to. Again that name echoed in his mind. Kate. He thought of responsibility, not the kind written in rule books, but the kind that comes from knowing what is right. He thought of how trust is built, not through titles, but through consistent actions over time. Without raising his voice, he spoke clearly. "I'm moving now." The words shocked those around him. "You can't," someone said quickly. "This hasn't been approved." He looked at them calmly. "I understand," he replied, "but I won't wait." The hallway seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped. Eyes turned toward him. In that moment, everyone knew he was crossing an invisible line. If he was wrong, the consequences would be serious. But he did not hesitate. He turned and walked with purpose, his footsteps steady, his mind focused. He followed the route he knew well, passing doors he had guarded countless times before. Each step felt heavy, yet certain. Fear was there, but it did not control him. Behind him, whispers started. Some were shocked, some were worried, some were quietly impressed. No one stopped him. As he moved forward, his thoughts remained clear. He was not acting out of pride or defiance. He was acting because he believed waiting would cause harm. And in his heart, protecting what mattered most came before protecting his own position. When he reached the next checkpoint, another guard looked at him in surprise. "Did you get the order?" the guard asked. He shook his head. "No," he said honestly. The other guard hesitated. "Then why?" "Because her name was mentioned," he said simply. That was enough. The second guard stepped aside without another word. Inside, the situation was tense. People moved quickly, trying to control what they could. The guard's presence immediately changed the energy in the room. His calm authority reassured some, while others grew more nervous. Within minutes, messages began traveling back through the palace. Officials realized action had already been taken. There was no turning back now. As the guard stood firm, he felt the weight of what he had done. He knew questions would come, reports would be written. Decisions about his future would be discussed behind closed doors. Still, he felt no regret. He reminded himself that rules exist to protect people, not delay help. And sometimes, true service means acting before permission arrives. Elsewhere in the palace, the silence broke. Phones rang, advisors gathered, senior figures were informed. The guard's name was mentioned, followed by concern, confusion, and disbelief. "Who told him to move?" someone asked. "No one," came the answer. A pause followed. Meanwhile, the guard remained where he was needed, focused and alert. He did not seek attention. He did not explain himself unless asked. His job now was to see the moment through, whatever it required. As time passed, it became clear that his instincts were correct. The situation, if delayed, could have grown far more serious. Quietly, tension began to ease. People started to understand what could have happened. Still, the consequences had not disappeared. When higher authority finally arrived, the room fell silent once more. Eyes shifted between the officials and the guard. Everyone waited for the response. The guard stood straight, ready to accept whatever came next. He did not prepare excuses. He did not plan speeches. If asked why he acted, he would tell the truth. Because sometimes, a name carries more meaning than any order. And sometimes, doing the right thing means stepping forward when everyone else steps back. The moment ended, but its impact had only begun. The hours after the incident moved slowly, but the guard's thoughts moved fast. As he stood at his post later that day, his body remained still, yet his mind traveled backward through time. He kept thinking about why that single name had pushed him to act without hesitation. It was not just duty, it was history. He had joined the Royal Guard many years ago, young and disciplined, believing that service meant distance. Guards were trained to stay invisible, to protect without being noticed. Royals passed by like figures in a storybook, important, respected, but far removed from ordinary life. That belief changed the first time he saw Kate up close. It was a cold afternoon and the palace was busy with preparations for an event. Staff members were tense, rushing from one task to another. The guard had been assigned to a quiet corridor, one that most important guests never used. He expected nothing unusual. Then she appeared. There was no dramatic entrance, no loud announcement. She walked calmly, holding a folder, her steps unhurried. When she noticed the guard, she stopped, looked at him, and smiled. "Good afternoon," she said. He nodded as trained. "Good afternoon, ma'am." She didn't walk away immediately. Instead, she asked, "Have you been standing here long?" The question surprised him. No royal had ever asked him that before. "A few hours," he answered carefully. She frowned slightly. "That's a long time. I hope you get a break soon." Then she thanked him for his service and continued on her way. It was a small moment, short, simple, yet it stayed with him. Over the years, there were many such moments. Kate noticed things others overlooked. When a staff member looked tired, she asked if everything was all right. When someone made a mistake, she corrected it quietly without embarrassment. She remembered faces, names, and stories. She spoke with respect, never urgency, even when schedules were tight. The guard watched all of this from a distance. He never expected to be seen. Yet somehow she saw everyone. Once, during a difficult period for the royal household, tension filled the palace. Rumors circulated, pressure mounted, and emotions ran high. The guard remembered standing outside a meeting room where voices rose sharply inside. When the door opened, Kate stepped out. Her face showed strain, but her posture remained steady. She noticed the guard and paused. "Thank you for keeping things calm out here," she said. He didn't know how she knew it had been difficult. He had done nothing extraordinary, just his job. Still, her words mattered. They made him feel that his presence had value. Another time, there was confusion during a public appearance. Plans changed suddenly and staff scrambled to adjust. The guard watched as frustration spread quickly. Kate stepped forward and spoke calmly, reorganizing things step by step. Her tone was firm but kind. People listened, not because they feared her but because they trusted her. The guard understood then that authority could exist without pressure. As years passed, loyalty formed quietly, not the kind demanded by position but the kind that grows naturally. The guard never spoke about it. He simply felt it. That was why, when her name was spoken during the incident, his mind reacted before his body did. It was not panic. It was recognition. Recognition that someone who had always protected others now needed protection herself. Later that evening, the guard sat alone during a short break. The palace was calmer now, but whispers still traveled through the halls. He knew officials were discussing his actions. He did not listen closely. His thoughts were elsewhere. He remembered a winter evening when snow had fallen heavily. Staff struggled to move between buildings. Kate had insisted that extra support be arranged so no one slipped or was left out in the cold. "Everyone matters," she had said, "not just those in front of the cameras." Those words had spread quietly among staff. People remembered them. The guard realized something important. He had not acted because Kate was important by title. He had acted because she had always acted as if others mattered. That kind of behavior builds a silent bond. The next day, he noticed subtle changes. Staff members looked at him differently. Some nodded with quiet respect. Others avoided his gaze, unsure of what to say. No one asked him directly why he had acted. Perhaps they already knew. An older guard approached him during a shift change. "You took a risk," the man said quietly. "Yes," the guard replied. "Do you regret it?" The guard thought for a moment. "No," the older guard nodded. "Then you did the right thing." Those simple words eased a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. Elsewhere, discussions continued. Officials reviewed timelines, decisions, and responses. Some questioned procedure. Others acknowledged outcomes. Slowly it became clear that the guard's action had prevented further complications. Waiting would have caused harm. Still, no public statement was made. The palace did not operate that way. Some things were handled quietly, behind closed doors. Kate herself returned to her duties with calm grace. She did not seek attention or mention the incident. But one afternoon, as she passed through the corridor, she paused near the guard. Their eyes met briefly. "Thank you," she said softly. There were no cameras. No witnesses close enough to hear, just a simple acknowledgement. The guard nodded. "Always," he replied. That single word carried years of meaning. As days passed, life inside the palace returned to its usual rhythm. Yet something had changed. The incident became a silent reminder that rules are important, but judgment matters too. That leadership is not always loud, and that respect, once earned, carries weight beyond any command. The guard continued his service as before. He did not expect recognition. He did not want it. What mattered to him was knowing that when the moment came, he had listened to his instincts and his experience. Kate's name had been enough because it stood for consistency, care, and quiet strength. And the guard knew that if faced with the same choice again, he would not hesitate. Some decisions are made in seconds, but they are shaped by years. This was one of them. The days following the incident were calm on the surface, but underneath, tension moved quietly through the palace. The guard could feel it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, in the way some officials lowered their voices as he passed. Nothing had been said to him directly yet, but he knew questions were coming. Inside the palace, every action left a trace. Reports were written, timelines reviewed, and decisions examined closely. The guard's name appeared more than once in those documents. Some described his action as decisive. Others described it as premature. A few used careful words like unapproved initiative. The guard continued his duties as normal. He stood straight, followed orders, and remained respectful. Outwardly, nothing about him changed. Inside, however, he felt the weight of uncertainty. He had acted with confidence in the moment, but now he had time to think. Time brought doubt with it. Late one evening, he was called to a small office near the inner wing. The request was polite but firm. No explanation was given. As he walked down the corridor, his steps echoed loudly. He reminded himself to stay calm. Whatever happened, he would speak honestly. Inside the office sat two senior officials and a security advisor. Their expressions were neutral, professional. No one offered a seat immediately. "Thank you for coming," one official said. "Yes, sir," the guard replied. They asked him to describe the events of that day in detail. He did so carefully, choosing simple words, avoiding emotion. He explained what he had seen, what he had heard, and why he decided to move when he did. "Did anyone instruct you to act?" the advisor asked. "No," the guard answered. "Were you aware that approval had not been granted?" another asked. "Yes." A brief silence followed. "Then why did you proceed?" the first official asked. The guard paused, then spoke clearly. "Because waiting would have caused risk, and because the name mentioned signaled urgency to me." "Explain that," the advisor said. The guard did not mention loyalty or personal feelings. He spoke of experience, of patterns he had seen over years of service, of moments when hesitation had led to problems, of understanding the environment and the people within it. "I believed immediate action was the safest option," he concluded. The officials exchanged glances. One of them closed the folder in front of him. "You understand," the official said slowly, "that protocol exists for a reason." "Yes, sir." "And you understand that breaking it sets a precedent." "Yes." Another silence followed, longer this time. "We are not questioning your intentions," the advisor said. "We are questioning the process." The guard nodded. "I understand." The meeting ended without a clear outcome. He was dismissed politely, told to continue his duties. No warning, no praise, just uncertainty. As he returned to his post, his thoughts were heavy. He wondered if he had misjudged the balance between instinct and rule. He reminded himself why he had acted, but doubt lingered. The palace staff felt it too. People whispered quietly. Some feared consequences. Others believed the guard had done exactly what was needed. No one knew how the situation would end. One afternoon, as the guard stood near a window overlooking the courtyard, a young staff member approached him nervously. "I just wanted to say," she began, then stopped, unsure if she should continue. He looked at her calmly. "It's all right." She took a breath. "If you hadn't acted, things could have gone very wrong. Thank you." Before he could reply, she hurried away, embarrassed. Her words stayed with him. Later that day, he noticed that schedules had been adjusted. Security procedures were reviewed quietly. No one said it openly, but changes were being made. The incident had exposed gaps. Instead of blame, there was reflection. Still, the guard's future remained unclear. One evening, as the palace settled into quiet, he stood outside a restricted area when footsteps approached. It was the older guard who had spoken to him earlier. "They're still talking," the older guard said quietly. "I expected that," the younger guard replied. "You know," the older guard continued, "I've seen many situations like this. Sometimes people get punished for doing the right thing simply because it makes others uncomfortable." The guard nodded. "I know." "But sometimes," the older guard added, "it changes how decisions are made." That thought gave the guard some comfort. The next morning, another meeting was called. This time, more people were present. The atmosphere was serious but not hostile. The guard was asked again to explain his decision. He did so just as before. This time, questions focused on outcomes rather than rules. "What would have happened if you had waited?" one official asked. The guard explained calmly, outlining possible risks. Others nodded slowly. A senior figure spoke at last. "We train our guards to follow orders," he said, "but we also train them to think." The room fell silent. "Your action," the senior figure continued, "was not perfect in procedure, but it was effective." The guard felt his chest tighten, but he remained still. "There will be no formal penalty," the senior figure said. "However, this incident will be reviewed carefully." "Yes, sir," the guard said. The meeting ended with no applause, no dramatic resolution. Just a decision quietly delivered. When the guard stepped back into the corridor, he felt lighter, not relieved exactly, but steady. He had faced the consequences and been heard. Over the following days, life returned to routine. The whispers faded. The guard resumed his role fully, without restriction. Some officials treated him more formally than before. Others showed subtle respect. Kate continued her work as usual. She did not bring attention to the incident. Yet during a brief encounter in a hallway, she paused. "I know there was discussion," she said gently. "I hope you're all right." "Yes," the guard replied. "I am," she nodded. "I'm glad." There was no need for more words. The palace moved on, but the lesson remained. Rules guide action, but judgment gives them meaning. Experience matters. Humanity matters. The guard understood now that risk is never without cost, but neither is hesitation. That incident became a quiet turning point, not one marked by ceremony but by understanding. And the guard, standing once more at his post, knew that when the next uncertain moment came, he would again be ready to choose wisely, even if the choice was difficult. Time moved forward, and with it came a quiet change inside the palace. The incident was no longer discussed openly, but it had not been forgotten. It lived in small adjustments, in calmer responses, and in the way people paused before making decisions. Silence, it seemed, had become a teacher. The guard noticed it during his daily duties. Meetings ended with more careful planning. Instructions were clearer. There was less confusion, less waiting for someone else to take responsibility. It was as if the palace had learned that delay could be just as risky as action. No official announcement was ever made. No statement explained what had happened or why certain changes were introduced. From the outside, everything looked normal. Inside, however, people understood that something important had shifted. The guard himself felt different, not proud, not anxious, just aware. He had learned something about himself. He now knew that when faced with uncertainty, he could trust his judgment without losing respect for structure. That balance was not easy, but it was necessary. One morning, he was assigned to a new position near a quieter wing of the palace. It was not a promotion, but it was not a punishment either. The placement felt intentional. He was closer to decision-making areas, closer to moments where quick thinking mattered. As he stood there, he watched staff members pass by. Some smiled politely, others nodded with familiarity. A few paused to exchange a brief word. These small interactions told him more than any official document could. He was still trusted. Kate moved through the palace with the same calm presence as always. If the incident had affected her, she did not show it. She continued her work with focus and care, meeting people, listening, and responding thoughtfully. She did not speak about what had happened, and she did not allow it to define her. Yet her silence carried meaning. The guard noticed how others responded to her now. There was a deeper respect in their behavior, a quiet awareness that leadership was not just about position. It was about consistency, empathy, and steady judgment under pressure. One afternoon, a minor issue arose during preparations for an internal event. Nothing serious, but enough to cause confusion. Staff members began waiting for instructions, unsure who should decide next steps. The guard watched closely. Instead of raising voices or sending urgent messages, Kate stepped in calmly. She asked a few questions, listened to answers, and made a clear decision. Her tone was steady, her words simple. Within minutes, the issue was resolved. No one mentioned the past incident. No one needed to. The guard realized that true authority does not demand attention. It earns it. Later that week, he was invited to a quiet review session. This time, it was not about discipline or explanation. It was about learning. Senior staff discussed how to respond better in uncertain situations. Guards and advisors shared perspectives. The guard was asked to speak, not to defend himself but to explain how he assessed urgency. He spoke honestly, about observation, about experience, about recognizing patterns rather than waiting for confirmation. He explained that sometimes the absence of clarity is itself a warning. People listened carefully. When the session ended, the mood was thoughtful. No one rushed out. Conversations continued quietly, respectfully. The guard felt something rare, a sense of shared purpose. That evening, as he walked through the courtyard, he reflected on how quickly moments can shape outcomes. A single decision had led to reflection, improvement, and understanding. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Days turned into weeks. The palace settled into its rhythm again. But beneath the routine, awareness remained. People trusted each other a little more. They spoke up a little sooner. They waited less when action was needed. The guard felt proud not of himself but of the environment he served. One late afternoon, as light filtered through tall windows, Kate passed by the guard's post. She slowed, not stopping completely but enough to acknowledge him. "You've been doing well," she said simply. "Thank you," he replied. She nodded and continued on. There was no praise, no spotlight, just recognition. That moment stayed with him. It reminded him that the most meaningful acknowledgement often comes quietly. As the year moved on, new challenges appeared as they always did. Some were small, some required careful coordination. The guard approached each with the same calm focus. He followed protocol, but he also trusted his awareness. He understood now that both were necessary. Others noticed this balance. Younger guards watched how he handled situations. Some asked for advice. He never told them to break rules. He told them to understand why rules exist and when judgment must guide action. "Listen first," he would say. "Observe, then decide." The palace had not changed overnight, but it had grown stronger. The incident that once caused tension had become a quiet reference point, not spoken of directly, but understood. It reminded everyone that leadership is not always loud and courage is not always visible. For the guard, the experience left a lasting impression. He no longer measured success by recognition or advancement. He measured it by impact, by knowing that his actions, even when questioned, had led to something better. Kate continued to lead with calm strength. Her influence remained steady, shaping the environment through example rather than instruction. She did not seek credit and she did not avoid responsibility. She simply did what was needed, consistently. The guard respected that deeply. One evening, as he stood watch under the fading light, he felt a quiet sense of clarity. He understood now that some moments test more than skill, they test values. And when values are clear, decisions become easier, even when they are difficult. The palace walls held many stories, but this one would never be written down. It would live instead in behavior, in trust, and in quiet understanding. Silence had spoken louder than orders. And those who listened had learned something important. The palace returned fully to its normal rhythm, yet something invisible remained changed. People still followed routines, guards still stood at their posts, and officials still worked behind closed doors. But beneath all of that, there was a shared understanding that could not be erased. A moment of choice had left a permanent mark. The guard continued his service without expecting anything more. He no longer waited for judgment, praise, or confirmation. He had already faced the hardest part, standing by a decision made in silence. Now, his days were steady, calm, and purposeful. He noticed how younger guards behaved around him. They watched how he listened before speaking, how he stayed alert without appearing tense, and how he respected authority while remaining thoughtful. Some asked quiet questions during breaks. Others simply observed. He answered honestly, never presenting himself as an example, only as someone who had learned. Every situation is different, he would say, but responsibility is always the same. The palace leadership also moved forward. Procedures were refined, not rewritten loudly but adjusted with care. Communication improved. Trust grew slowly, strengthened by reflection rather than reaction. The incident had not weakened the system, it had improved it. Kate continued her role with the same calm presence she always carried. If the experience had added weight to her responsibilities, she bore it with quiet strength. She spoke thoughtfully, listened carefully, and acted decisively when needed. People felt steady around her, and that steadiness spread. There were no interviews, no public praise, no official stories shared. Yet within the palace the moment lived on, not as gossip but as a reference. When decisions felt unclear, someone would pause and say, "Let us be careful." Others would nod, understanding exactly what that meant. One afternoon, months later, a situation arose that tested the lessons learned. It was not dramatic, but it required quick coordination. Information was incomplete and pressure was building. The guard stood nearby, observing. This time there was no hesitation. Officials communicated clearly. Guards adjusted smoothly. Action was taken at the right moment, not too early, not too late. The situation resolved quietly. The guard felt a sense of quiet satisfaction, not because he had influenced it directly, but because growth had taken place. Later that day, as he walked through a familiar corridor, he paused briefly. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows on the floor. He thought about how easily that earlier moment could have gone differently, how fear of consequences might have stopped him, how silence could have become regret. Instead, silence had become understanding. That evening, as he prepared to end his shift, he received a brief message requesting his presence in a small meeting room. There was no urgency in the request, no explanation attached. He went calmly. Inside the room sat a senior official alone. The atmosphere was relaxed. "Please sit," the official said. The guard did so. "I won't take much of your time," the official continued. "I just wanted to say something that was never said formally." The guard listened. "Your decision months ago was not written into records," the official said. "It won't appear in reports or history, but it influenced how we operate. That matters." The guard nodded, unsure what to say. "Sometimes," the official added, "the most important actions are the ones that don't leave paper trails." The meeting ended simply. No handshake, no formal statement, just words spoken once. As the guard left the room, he felt complete, not celebrated, not rewarded, but at peace. On another quiet morning, Kate passed him again in the corridor. This time, she stopped fully. "I wanted you to know," she said gently, "that trust is remembered even when it isn't spoken." He met her gaze and nodded. "That means a great deal." She smiled briefly and continued on. The guard returned to his post, standing tall, alert, and calm. He understood now that service is not about recognition. It is about readiness, about being prepared to act when needed, even when no one is watching. The palace walls remained unchanged, but the people within them carried lessons forward. Courage had been redefined, not as bold display but as quiet responsibility. Leadership had been reinforced, not as command but as consistency. Years later, new guards would join, new officials would take positions, and new challenges would appear. Most would never hear the full story. They would only feel the effects in smoother decisions, clearer communication, and a culture of trust. The guard would remain part of that fabric, one thread among many, steady and unseen. He never told the story himself. He did not need to. It lived on in the way people acted when seconds mattered, in the way they listened before speaking, in the way they understood that sometimes waiting is riskier than moving. And if anyone ever wondered why that change began, there would be no official answer, only a quiet truth. That once, in a moment of uncertainty, A royal guard did not wait for approval, because a name built on years of humanity and trust was enough.